Welcome to the Secret Underground Laboratory Recovery and Salvage, where rude mechanicals do magic. Hello, I'm Bronze Age, Director of the Secret Underground Laboratory Recovery and Salvage. And today we're at the BF bench for a fairly short video about a quite interesting little dinette table. Now this is a drop leaf table, and this little rounded joint here is called a rule joint. And that's because it's supposed to look like a rule. Maybe, I don't know. But the main function of this is that this curved piece, which overhangs the center of the table, carries most of the stress. So you won't end up with what actually happened with this table, which is the screws pulled out of the hinge. Given its age, I guess that's sort of to be expected. And what I've done is I drilled out the old screw holes, cut some plugs from a scrap piece of walnut, and now I can just put it back together. And while I had it upside down like this, I started noticing lots of unusual things about this particular table. The first thing I noticed was the saw cuts, which shows that the mortise this hinge sits down in was cut by hand. And there's a transition period between, say, Duncan Fife, late 1700s, when everything in the shop, a cabinet shop, was made with hammers, saws, and chisels. And that gradually transforms into the age of Ethan Allen, where everything in the shop was cut with some kind of power tool, some kind of power machinery. This is a combination of the two. All the boards and the planks, they're nice and smooth. They were cut out with power saws and then planed with power planes, but it's still got a lot of handwork in it, because that was then the most efficient and easiest way to do it. And it's easy to spot handwork because there's always layout lines, like in this case would have been made with a gauge similar to this. This is the support for the leaf. Pull it all the way out. This piece would have been cut with a handsaw, and this little leaf for a finger grip. All of that done by somebody sitting at a bench sawing out these pieces here. Now I think the legs are a combination of handwork and machine work. This fluting was probably cut out on a mill because it's very straight and uniform. But when I look up here at the transition between one part and another and compare it to all the other legs, there's just slight variations here showing me that this wasn't made on a machine that just was following a pattern and spitting out one after another. Some human actually stood there at the lathe and cut this down and made each leg one at a time. Now the last detail is the drawer. The bottom is one single piece of wood, but I don't think they sawed it out from a log this wide and this long. Probably what they did was they took a log and they simply shaved it and took off one big, long, wide shaving, flattened it out, and that became the drawer bottom, which is why this particular grain pattern you see here resembles a sheet of plywood, which is the way plywood is made today. The drawer corners are handmade dovetails, and I know that because there's little tiny spaces here where I can see where the saw went slightly beyond the tail. And there's a good reason for that, is if you want to make a smooth surface on wood with a power tool, the cutting blade has got to be moving very fast. And to cut into these little corners like this, you would have to have a very small cutting blade, something like this, which would have been used in the Ethan Allen furniture mill. But at the time period when this piece was made, it simply wasn't possible to turn a little bit like this fast enough, which would require something around 15,000 to 20,000 RPM. You could plane this board flat with a plane with a rotating blade, but the diameter of the blade would have to be 10, 12 inches, so that even though the whole thing was turning fairly slow, out there at the outside diameter, the blade is moving pretty quickly. We've also got the same dovetails back here at the back. And then holding the drawer panel on, we've got cut nails, the square kind. When you look at it from this angle, you can see that this leg here is decidedly bent inward, because up here is an old repair. I may have to sit down with a cup of coffee and decide if I want to try and do something about that. But given all the clues, I would have to put an age on this of somewhere between 1850, 1870, so one broken leg is probably not that big a surprise. Now, technology does not move in a straight line across everywhere. They could have been using these techniques well up into the early 1900s, but I doubt it. The cut nails were replaced by wire nails pretty much universally by around 1900. So we've got our 150-year-old or slightly older table, and appreciate you sitting through this video through with me. This is Bronze Age for the Secret Underground Laboratory. Would really appreciate it if you would give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. Any questions or comments are welcome. I respond to all. If you've got any questions about furniture repair, lamps, lighting repair, any sort of the things we do around here, I'll certainly be happy to answer them. And again, thank you for watching.